Today, we are getting pharmacokinetics versus pharmacodynamics explained, alongside the complete ADME framework. Because pharmacology comes down to a simple coin toss. Pharmacodynamics is what the drug does to your body, but pharmacokinetics, that is the brutal journey of what your body does to the drug. To dose a patient safely, you have to master both the macro and the micro views. If you don't understand the 4-step ADME gauntlet every single medication must survive, you won't know if your dose is going to cure your patient or accidentally cause a toxic disaster. Let's break down the blueprint. If you want to understand how any medication works, you have to separate the macro from the micro. Pharmacokinetics is the macro view. It asks one simple question: how does the drug move? Think of pharmacokinetics as the drug's epic, highly dangerous road trip across the country. It has to navigate through systemic organs like your gut, blood, liver, and kidneys, without getting destroyed along the way. Pharmacodynamics, on the other hand, is the micro view. It asks, how does the drug act? This is the exact moment the drug finishes its road trip, walks up to the target cell, and puts a key into the lock to trigger a cellular response. No lock, no effect. But before a drug can even attempt to unlock that cellular door, it has to survive the primary framework of pharmacokinetics, a brutal 4-step gauntlet. That gauntlet is the ADME pipeline, and step 1 is A for absorption. It doesn't matter if a patient swallows a pill, gets an injection, or uses a patch. Before a drug can do anything, it has to successfully absorb and enter the systemic circulation. Once it hits the bloodstream, you might think the hard part is over. But getting into the blood is only half the battle, because now we hit D for distribution. The drug has to figure out how to disperse out of the blood and navigate deep into the body's tissues to find its actual target. And the body does not make the directions easy. Anatomical barricades and blood flow restrictions will actively try to limit where that drug can go. Let's say the drug actually finds its target. Once it has done its job, the body wants it gone. That brings us to M for metabolism. This is the chemical breakdown of the drug, and your liver is the primary organ responsible for making it happen. Think of the liver as the body's ultimate chemical chop shop. It forcefully alters the drug's molecular structure so that the body can easily recognize it, trap it, and prepare it for disposal. Which leads us to the final step of the gauntlet, E for excretion. This is the ultimate clearance of the drug from the body, and it's usually handled by the kidneys. The kidneys filter out those broken down drug metabolites, trap them in water, and flush them completely out of your system. Let's look at what actually happens during that first step of absorption. When a patient swallows an oral medication, it doesn't get a straight shot to the bloodstream, which brings us to a massive clinical concept: bioavailability. This is the actual fraction of the drug that survives the journey and makes it into the blood. Because once a drug is absorbed through the gut wall, the blood vessels immediately divert it directly to the liver. And the liver charges a heavy tax. This is known as the first pass effect. The liver actively metabolizes and destroys a significant portion of your oral medication before it ever has a chance to reach systemic circulation. That surviving fraction left over? That is your bioavailability. Let's say our surviving drug fraction finally makes it past the liver and into the systemic circulation. We are now officially in the distribution phase. But the blood is not an empty swimming pool. It is packed with transport proteins, like albumin. And once a drug is in the blood, it must follow the rules of protein binding. Think of these plasma proteins like heavily armored taxis. In pharmacology, a drug is either bound inside the taxi, or it is free on the street. And here is the catch. If a drug is bound to a protein, it is completely inactive. Because the protein taxi is too large to cross the vascular barrier, the drug is trapped inside the bloodstream. It cannot enter the tissues, and it cannot reach its target receptor. Only the free, unbound drugs walking on the street are pharmacologically active and able to do their job. The bound drugs simply act as a floating reservoir, waiting for their turn to be released. So, our active, free drug is walking the streets, ready to leave the blood and enter the tissues. But here is the ultimate question for clinicians. Exactly how deep into the body does this drug actually hide? To calculate that, we use the volume of distribution. Now, this isn't a literal physical pool of liquid in the body. It is a theoretical math concept that tells us how widely a drug disperses away from the bloodstream. Which path the drug takes completely depends on its chemical personality. Specifically, is it hydrophilic, meaning it loves water? Or is it lipophilic, meaning it loves fat? If a drug is hydrophilic, it has a low VD. It remains trapped right there in the central vascular compartment, the blood plasma. Because of this, its distribution value is very close to your actual intravascular volume. But if a drug is highly lipophilic, it has a high VD. It completely escapes the bloodstream, distributing widely into deep peripheral tissues and fat compartments, where it can hide for a very long time. Eventually, the drug finishes its job and needs to be cleared out. But remember, the kidneys can only flush out things trapped in water. If a drug is highly lipophilic, meaning it loves fat, the kidneys can't grab it. It has to be sent back to the liver's chemical chop shop, specifically to a massive piece of machinery known as the Cytochrome P450 enzyme system. This CYP450 system runs two main conveyor belts. Conveyor belt 1 is for inactivation. The enzymes rip apart active lipid-soluble drugs and convert them into polar, water-soluble metabolites. Now they are finally ready for renal flushing. But the liver isn't just a destroyer. Sometimes it is the ultimate activator. This brings us to conveyor belt 2 and the concept of prodrugs. A prodrug is a medication that is swallowed completely inactive. It does absolutely nothing until it passes through the liver, where the CYP450 enzymes physically break off the molecular lock, releasing the active drug into the bloodstream. Once the drug is prepped by the liver and sent to the kidneys, it doesn't just instantly vanish. The body clears drugs on a strict schedule known as a half-life. Simply put, this is the amount of time it takes for exactly 50% of the drug to be eliminated from your bloodstream. It is a cascading fraction. After one half-life, you have 50% left. After two, you have 25%. By the time you reach 4 to 5 half-lives, the drug is virtually completely eliminated from the body. But what if we don't want the drug to disappear? What if the patient needs continuous treatment? That brings us to the holy grail of clinical dosing, steady state. This is the condition where the amount of drug you are putting into the patient perfectly matches the amount of drug the kidneys are taking out. When administration equals elimination, the scale balances. Just like total clearance, it generally takes 4 to 5 half-lives of consistent dosing to reach this steady state. Once you are there, the drug levels remain stable, making it the perfect time to draw blood and measure serum concentrations. Our drug has finally survived the epic macro road trip. It has been absorbed, distributed, and it is standing right in front of its target cell. Now, we flip the coin. Welcome to Pharmacodynamics. We are no longer asking how the drug moves. We are asking what the drug does to the body. And it all comes down to a 3-step cellular response. Step 1 is affinity. The drug molecule doesn't just bump into the cell randomly. It is magnetically drawn to a highly specific receptor shape. If the key matches the lock, it pulls them together. Step 2 is binding. This is the exact moment the molecule clicks into the receptor, instantly flipping the cell from a dormant, sleeping state into an active state. And that triggers step 3. The mechanism of action. Simply turning that lock unleashes a massive cascade of energetic physiological effects deep down inside the cell. This cascade is what actually drops your blood pressure, stops a pain signal, or forces a muscle to contract. Turning the key is just the start. In the real world, a drug's effect runs on a strict timeline, and the first major milestone is the onset. This is the exact moment the drug's concentration finally crosses the minimum effective concentration line, and the patient actually starts feeling the clinical effect. It takes time for enough drug molecules to bind to enough receptors to hit that minimum threshold. But the pressure keeps building. The drug concentration keeps rising until we hit the top of the mountain, the peak. The peak is the absolute highest concentration the drug will reach in the body, which translates to the maximum possible effect happening at the receptor sites. But what goes up must come down, thanks to our liver and kidneys. This entire window, from the moment the whistle blows at onset to the moment the factory shuts down, is called the duration. It is the total span of time the curve remains above the minimum effective line, dictating exactly how long the patient feels relief. We have treated pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics as two different worlds. But to truly understand a medication, we have to synthesize them together. And that happens right here on the dose-response curve. The x-axis represents your pharmacokinetics, how much drug was actually delivered. The y-axis represents your pharmacodynamics, how big of a cellular response was triggered. This graph answers two clinical questions. The first is, potency simply asks how much drug is needed to trigger a response. If a drug is highly potent, you only need a microscopic dose to get the engine running. If it has low potency, you have to shovel in massive concentrations to get the exact same effect. But potency isn't everything. The second question is efficacy. This is the absolute ceiling. It asks, no matter how much drug we pump in, how big is the maximum possible biological effect? A highly potent drug might act fast, but a highly efficacious drug will always hit harder. In the clinic, we will almost always choose a drug with higher efficacy over a drug with higher potency. So, we want maximum efficacy. But in the clinic, you cannot just pump a patient full of drugs until the roof blows off. You have to navigate the therapeutic window. If your dose is too low, you hit the sub-therapeutic zone. The drug is completely ineffective. But push the dose too high, and you hit toxicity, where the concentration overwhelms the receptors and causes severe physiological harm. Your goal is to keep the drug perfectly trapped in that green middle zone. For many drugs, this road is wide and safe. You have plenty of room for error. But this brings us to one of the most dangerous concepts in pharmacology, the narrow therapeutic index, or NTI. With NTI drugs like Digoxin or Phenytoin, the road is incredibly thin. Just a microscopic change in the patient's PK or PD can send them careening off the cliff into toxicity. That is exactly why these specific drugs require constant therapeutic drug monitoring, drawing precise blood levels to ensure they stay on the road. Everything we have talked about today, from the ADME pipeline to the dose-response curve, is the standard biological blueprint for a healthy adult. But in the clinic, you are rarely treating healthy adults. There are massive variables that will completely rewrite this blueprint, and if you don't adjust for them, your standard dose becomes highly unpredictable. If a patient has hepatic disease, the liver's chop shop shuts down. Bioavailability spikes because the first-pass toll booth is broken, and prodrugs fail to activate. If they have renal impairment, the kidney water slide clogs. Clearance drops, half-life increases, and drugs pile up into toxicity. And at age extremes, like in pediatrics or geriatrics, the body's water and fat ratios shift dramatically, completely altering the drug's volume of distribution. And then there is pharmacogenetics. Sometimes a patient's DNA structurally alters their receptors, meaning your perfect drug key suddenly doesn't fit the lock at all. Pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics. What the body does to the drug and what the drug does to the body. You now have the complete foundational blueprint to navigate both sides of the coin. But having the blueprint is just step one. To actually safely treat your patients, we have to survive the gauntlet, piece by piece. Now that you understand the overarching framework, you aren't ready to calculate a single dose until we dive deep into the treacherous absorption phase. Click the video on screen to see exactly how the hepatic toll booth steals your oral medications and how we clinically outsmart it.